So, Prince William just quietly became the legal owner of a vast private estate that Camilla had spent years treating as her personal resource, filling it with her relatives and directing comfortable contracts toward her sister. And the absolute moment the paperwork was finalized, he removed every single one of them. No warning, no press statement, just a routine financial document with a name absent and a message so clear it resonated through every palace in the country. And what he is now preparing to do next has apparently sent Camilla into a state of genuine alarm, because sources say she is deeply concerned about where she will even live, given that the properties she moves through every single day do not contain a single thing she legally owns. And the man who does own them just demonstrated he is not feeling particularly generous. Before we get into the full fallout, if you enjoy royal deep dives where we actually examine the evidence, hit subscribe to Crown Watch right now. We break this down every week. Now let's get into it. The entire chain of events was set in motion on September 8, 2022, the moment Queen Elizabeth II drew her final breath at Balmoral Castle. In that single instant, before the world had even fully absorbed the announcement, a sequence of consequences fired through the British royal family that is still reshaping relationships today. Charles became king. That part everyone had anticipated. But something else occurred in that same breath, something that barely registered in the headlines but carried consequences that are nothing short of enormous. William, who was 40 years old at the time, became the Duke of Cornwall. It was automatic by law. The moment his father assumed the throne, William became the sole owner of one of the oldest and most consequential private estates on earth. This is not a ceremonial designation. The Duchy of Cornwall carries a value of approximately $1.2 billion. It spans 135,000 acres across 23 counties in England and Wales. It encompasses nearly the entirety of the Isles of Scilly, a stunning archipelago off the coast of Cornwall. It includes large portions of Dartmoor in Devon, ancient working farms, historic castles, tenant properties, holiday cottages, and decades of carefully managed financial investments. The estate was established in 1337 by King Edward III specifically for his son Edward the Black Prince, who became the first-ever Duke of Cornwall. The founding principle was straightforward and has never been altered. The estate belongs to the monarch's eldest son and heir to the throne. Nearly 700 years of history, and now it belonged to William. By 2025, William was drawing approximately $30 million a year from this estate alone. He pays tax on it voluntarily, because the law does not require him to. That is the scale of financial independence we are discussing. But here is where the story takes a darker turn, and this is the part that most people missed entirely. The Duchy of Cornwall was the very same estate that had been funding Charles's household for decades. While Charles was Duke of Cornwall, this estate generated his personal income. It funded his way of life, his properties, his projects. And during those same years, Charles was conducting the affair with Camilla that comprehensively destroyed his marriage to Diana. The affair that Diana herself described, in her own words, as making her feel as though there were three people inside her marriage. What most people never witnessed was what it cost Diana behind closed doors. Knowing her husband was choosing another woman, repeatedly and without remorse, had hollowed out her sense of self completely. According to those close to her, she would draw staff members aside, fear visible in her eyes, and ask them quietly, "Am I beautiful enough?" When they told her yes, she would shake her head slowly and whisper, "Don't lie to the princess." Like a small child fighting back tears. A woman the entire world regarded as extraordinary could no longer see it in herself, because the man she had married had made her feel like she did not exist. There were nights when palace staff heard muffled weeping from her rooms at 3 o'clock in the morning. Many nights she slept apart from Charles, alone inside one of the grandest buildings in the world, invisible to the public and completely empty within. She grew so self-conscious, so consumed by the sense that she was losing her husband to another woman, that people who knew her well described watching a person disappear from the inside. The affair that William and Harry witnessed destroying their mother from the time they were small boys, the life that this very estate had funded, now belonged to Diana's son. And there was one further detail that almost nobody ever raised. The Duchy of Cornwall had been designed specifically by King Edward III so that heirs could never be financially controlled or pressured by the reigning monarch. William owning it meant he was financially independent of his own father, independent of everyone. And that independence was about to have very real consequences that Camilla's family was about to feel directly. Because inside that estate, drawing a royal income for nearly 20 years, was a woman named Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's younger sister. She had been brought in 2005 to design the interiors of duchy properties across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly. She was appointed without any competitive process. She received the contract because her sister had married the man who controlled the estate. That was the entire basis of the arrangement. And for 20 years, it functioned exactly as intended, until the day William became her employer. What happened next sent a signal through Camilla's family that landed like a thunderclap. Before we get there, though, you need to understand precisely who Camilla was and what she had been doing inside this family over the preceding 2 decades. Because William's actions did not emerge from nowhere. They were a response to something. And that something is considerably darker than most people have ever fully understood. Long before William had the authority to act, he had been watching. And what he was watching would have broken a lesser person. It began with a promise. Before Charles married Camilla in April 2005, William and Harry approached their father privately. They made one quiet and specific request. Harry later wrote about this conversation in his memoir, Spare. He described telling their father, "We support you. We endorse Camilla. We will welcome her into the family. Just please do not marry her. Just be together." The boys understood that a wedding would drag their mother's name back through every newspaper in the country. It would force the entire nation to compare Diana to the woman who had been her husband's companion throughout their marriage. Neither of them wanted that. Charles listened to both of his sons, and then married her regardless. To manage the public response, Buckingham Palace issued a specific public statement. When Charles eventually became king, Camilla would be known as Princess Consort. She would never be queen. That was the agreed position. William accepted it. He attended the wedding, shook hands, smiled for the cameras, and carried the weight of what it all meant somewhere deep inside where no one could reach it. In February 2022, something occurred that many people did not fully comprehend at the time. Queen Elizabeth II released a message marking her 70 years on the throne. It was framed as a moment of reflection and legacy, but buried within that message was a decision that would alter everything. She stated it was her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when King Charles assumed the throne. At first, people interpreted it as an act of acceptance, perhaps even forgiveness. But those close to the Queen described something entirely different. This was not about approval. This was fear. By this point, the Queen was dying. Her health was declining rapidly, and she understood it. She could see what was approaching. The crown would soon pass to Charles, and with it a storm she would not be present to contain. One insider put it without softening, she wasn't blessing Camilla. She was managing something. In private, the Queen had used words that never surfaced publicly. She had described Camilla as dangerous. She had observed carefully for years. She had seen how far things could go. And in those final years, she arrived at a decision that felt less like endorsement and more like a calculated concession. She gave Camilla what she wanted, not because she believed in her, but because she feared what might unfold if she did not. It was the act of a woman trying to contain something she knew she would not live long enough to confront directly. Then came May 2023, the coronation, and something else shifted quietly. The word consort began to fade until it vanished entirely. Camilla was no longer Queen Consort. She was simply Queen, the exact designation she had always sought, the one both princes had once made explicitly clear should never come to pass. And yet there it was, official and complete. One source later said what many had suspected all along, she was never going to accept anything less. William had watched every iteration of the original promise get quietly rewritten, and he had said nothing publicly. But the resentment, as sources described it, ran deep and was carefully concealed. One source stated it plainly, "William is more diplomatic than Harry, so he has tried to disguise his resentment. The way Camilla treated his mother has not been forgotten." And there was far more to resent than the title alone. Camilla did not simply wait for her influence to expand. She worked for it, and she had a very particular method of working. When she needed Charles to view William or Harry in an unfavorable light, she would approach him privately and feed him her version of events. She shaped what Charles believed about his own sons, gradually and quietly, from the inside. Royal biographer Christopher Anderson confirmed that Camilla was known to operate in precisely this way, delivering her assessments of William and Harry's shortcomings to Charles when no one else was present. But that was only one dimension of her approach. The other was the press. Camilla had cultivated relationships with key British journalists, and her team deployed those relationships strategically. When she needed favorable coverage, stories appeared. When she needed someone else to appear problematic, those stories appeared too. Her team planted the fabricated story that Meghan had made Kate cry in the days before the 2018 royal wedding. That story swept through the British press and caused genuine damage within the family. Everyone inside the palace understood it was false. Charles's communications team declined to correct it. William and Harry went directly to their father and told him what his team was doing. Charles shouted at them and told William he was being paranoid. Camilla had constructed a system in which every door they tried to open led back to her. William was not paranoid. He was paying close attention. He was cataloging every detail. And he was waiting for the moment he had the authority to respond. The arrangement with Annabelle had been built from the same foundation. Camilla's sister was handed a lucrative royal contract without competing for it, and she held it for 20 years. But what made it almost impossible to tolerate was what lay beneath the surface. Because long before the contract, there was something else, something concealed. Back when King Charles III was still married to Princess Diana, the affair with Camilla had to remain hidden. And there was one place where that hiding took place. A quiet country house in Dorset. Annabelle's house. Located in the village of Stourpane, isolated, private, shielded from attention. That was where they met, weekend after weekend. Annabelle provided the space, the cover, the protection. And that is what makes what followed so difficult to overlook. Years later, after everything had been exposed, after the damage had been done, after Diana was gone, Annabelle was being paid from the estate tied to Diana's legacy, paid from the very estate now belonging to William. When William finally had the authority to act, the only question was never whether he would. The question was how. The moment William became Duke of Cornwall, he knew exactly what he intended to do about Annabelle Elliot. He was going to remove her. He did not convene a meeting. He did not send a letter. He made no public statement whatsoever. He simply waited for the Duchy of Cornwall to release its routine annual financial accounts, a document almost nobody outside royal financial circles ever reads. A dry, technical record of income, expenditure, and staffing across the estate. But this time, something was different. Annabelle Elliot's name was absent. 20 years of royal employment concluded without a single public word. To appreciate how much that removal actually meant, you need to understand how much Annabelle had built over those 2 decades, and then you will understand precisely how much William just dismantled. Annabelle was genuinely accomplished and broadly respected in her field. In 2014, she was named the 5th most influential female interior designer in the United Kingdom. She had designed the interiors of 12 holiday cottages on the Isles of Scilly. She had worked on properties at Restormel Castle. She had transformed the Wynie Wormwood estate in Wales. She had converted a deteriorating barn at Dumfries House in Ayrshire, Scotland into a polished guest house used for weddings and private events. For nearly 20 years, her work was woven through some of the most significant properties in the entire royal portfolio. None of that preserved her position. Royal expert Omid Scobie explained the situation in careful language, the kind of language employed when someone is trying not to say something too directly, noting that since Prince William had assumed the role of Duke of Cornwall, Annabelle had been removed from the payroll, and that this had generated a degree of attention and commentary. The official account from sources was equally measured, stating the decision was no reflection on the quality of her work. It was not about her work. Everyone understood that. A separate royal source was considerably less restrained, stating that William's move sent a clear message, that he intended to remove those he regarded as taking advantage of royal resources and reduce the extravagant expenditure his father had built during his own tenure managing the duchy. Remove the hangers-on. That was the phrase that carried the real meaning. That is how William regarded the arrangement his father had created for his wife's family. At the same moment Annabelle disappeared from the payroll, William was filling the duchy with people of his own choosing. He brought in Harry Aubrey Fletcher and William Van Utsum, both personal friends and godparents to his children, Prince George and Prince Louis. The signal required no elaboration. Out went Camilla's family. In came William's people. Every position Charles had filled from within his own circle was now being reviewed. Every arrangement constructed around Camilla's convenience was being examined. On the surface, the financial figure was modest. Annabel had been paid somewhere between approximately £20,000 and £82,000 per year. Against a $1.2 billion estate, those sums are almost negligible. But the symbolism was vast, and every person inside the royal family felt it. It told Camilla that her family's access to the crown was not a permanent arrangement. It told the royal household that the transition from Charles's era to William's had already quietly commenced. And this was not the only move William made. Every year at Christmas, the royal family gathers at Sandringham. It is one of the most deeply ingrained traditions in the monarchy. Sandringham is where generations of royals have marked the holiday together. William will one day inherit it. Camilla decided to invite her son Tom Parker Bowles, her child from her first marriage, to the family Christmas there. Reports emerged that a furious William had made his position absolutely clear. He would not attend the main Christmas gathering if Tom was present. Camilla extended the invitation regardless. Tom confirmed to the Telegraph that his mother had personally asked him to come, telling him she had not shared Christmas with him in a long time. Tom attended. William did not appear at the main gathering at the principal house. He remained with Kate and their children at Anmer Hall, their residence on the Sandringham estate, and spent the holiday there instead. Camilla had effectively forced the future King of England out of his own family Christmas, at an estate he will one day own, because she extended an invitation and declined to withdraw it. That is not a minor family disagreement. That is a power struggle being conducted through seating plans and a Christmas lunch. Then in September 2025, something occurred publicly that made the existing tension impossible to deny. During Donald Trump's state visit to Windsor Castle, Kate had fallen into natural and easy conversation with Melania Trump. The two women connected warmly. Then, from the side, Camilla stepped in. What happened next lasted no more than a second, but it altered the entire atmosphere of the moment. Camilla raised her hand and made a brief, decisive motion toward Kate. It was a signal, and it communicated clearly: move, step aside, leave. It was not verbal, but it was unmistakable. Body language analyst Judy James later described it without ambiguity. It appeared she was exercising seniority, almost physically dismissing her. The clip circulated everywhere. Millions watched it, slowed it down, and replayed it, because what it revealed was deeply uncomfortable. The Queen appeared to be publicly dismissing the future Queen in the presence of world leaders. Behind closed doors, the reaction was immediate. Prince William had spent years managing his response carefully, but this was different. One source said it struck him hard, that it was not simply an awkward moment, it had crossed a line. Because this was no longer a private disagreement. It was a public statement, and it had just been delivered to the entire world. By that point, something even more significant was already taking place behind the scenes. King Charles III, still navigating his cancer diagnosis, had begun having private conversations with his son about what would follow after he was gone. One insider described the tone as urgent and deeply personal. Leave Camilla alone. That was the message Charles conveyed to his son. Protect her, do not turn against her, do not force her out. It was a king who may have been approaching the end of his life, spending whatever time remained attempting to secure his wife's future by appealing directly to the one person with the power to shape it. That single detail tells you more about where this story is heading than almost anything else. Because William's answer came not in words but in actions. It came in a Christmas he chose not to attend. It came in the people he appointed to replace the woman his father's wife had placed on his payroll. But the removal of Annabel Elliot and the Christmas standoff were only the parts the public could observe. The move that Camilla understood at the most fundamental level, the one that would define the remainder of her life, had nothing to do with payrolls or holiday gatherings. And everything to do with four walls and a roof. Because William had not simply inherited an estate. He had inherited the homes she calls her own. And the day is approaching when she will have to ask him whether she may continue living in them. Right now, Queen Camilla's situation appears entirely secure. She moves between Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Sandringham, and Balmoral. She carries out official royal duties. She has the full support and protection of her husband, the King. She holds the title Her Majesty the Queen. She serves as patron or president of more than 90 charities. From the outside, her position looks permanent and unassailable. But every single element of it is bound to one person, and that person has cancer. Here is something most people do not fully appreciate, and it is the most critical detail in this entire story. Sandringham House in Norfolk and Balmoral Castle in Scotland are not government properties. They are not Crown assets administered by an institution. They are privately owned, in the same way that a family home is privately owned. Queen Elizabeth II inherited both of them from her father, King George VI. When Elizabeth died in September 2022, they transferred directly to Charles. When Charles dies, they transfer directly to William. Balmoral carries a value of approximately $140 million. Sandringham is worth approximately $65 million. Together, that represents over $200 million in private property that Camilla currently moves through, sleeps in, and regards as home. None of it belongs to her. Not in any legal sense. Not in any document that exists anywhere. One day these properties will belong to William, the man who just removed her sister from his payroll without a single public word. Balmoral in particular carries a weight that extends far beyond its monetary value. William was 15 years old and staying at Balmoral with his brother Harry in August 1997 when their father came to their rooms before dawn to tell them their mother was dead. Diana had been killed in a car crash in Paris. William and Harry walked those grounds that morning, completely shattered, two boys trying to absorb something no child should ever be asked to survive. And the detail that sits beneath all of this like something cold and permanent is this. When Charles received the news from Paris, the first person he called was not the Queen, who was also at Balmoral. The first person he called was Camilla. She told him Diana would be fine. Then he called back with the news that she was gone. Camilla was the first to know. She was present for Charles's grief before his own sons were even awake. Camilla now walks those same grounds as Queen. William will own them. When Charles dies, the legal transfer is instantaneous and automatic, exactly as it was in 2022 when William became Duke of Cornwall. William becomes king. The moment his father is gone, Kate becomes queen. And Camilla loses the title the Queen entirely. It passes to Kate. Camilla would most likely become Queen Dowager, the title given to the widow of a king. It is not a degrading designation, but it is a visible step back that the entire world would register immediately. And here is what makes that prospect genuinely frightening for Camilla. Her title is not protected by birth. She is royal by marriage alone. That means it will fall entirely to William to determine what she is called after Charles is gone. Charles stripped Diana of her designation, her HRH status, after their divorce. William was present for that. He watched it happen to his mother. He understands precisely how the mechanism operates. And now he holds the same power. He could reclaim for his mother everything that Camilla displaced. Sandringham and Balmoral will belong to William. Whether Camilla can continue residing in those properties will depend entirely on what William decides. There is no legal instrument that guarantees her access. She will be a guest, if he chooses to extend that courtesy. And here is the detail that makes her situation almost impossible to navigate. Camilla had one piece of property in her life that was completely and solely hers. It was called Ray Mill House, a private home in Wiltshire that she had owned before she ever married Charles. She spoke about it with genuine warmth. She described the garden there as the finest therapy in the world. It was her retreat, her private ground, the one place where she could close the door and simply exist as herself, away from the demands of royal life. And then she sold it. She sold the only home that was truly hers. The reasons given were that she wished to commit fully to her royal life and her role beside Charles. But the consequence of that decision is both devastating and irreversible. When Charles dies, Camilla will have no private property of her own anywhere on earth. She will live wherever William determines she should live. The woman who spent 20 years engineering her way to the summit of the most powerful family in Britain, who managed the press, who shaped what Charles believed about his own children, who planted false stories, who forced the future king away from his own family Christmas, who publicly dismissed the future queen with a wave of her hand in front of the entire world, will now depend entirely on the goodwill of the man she helped push out of his own family home. She built the trap herself, and she walked into it with her eyes open.